All right, guys, today in front of me we have a Seelbachs exclusive. This is their 15-year, 5-month straight bourbon whiskey. This one comes in at 124.4 proof. Mash bill on this one is 74% corn, 18% rye, 8% malted barley. And this is Seelbach's very first non-finished whiskey release. Excited to see what this one's all about, guys. Without further ado, let's go. All right, guys, so as I stated, this one is 15 years and 5 months. Mash bill on this one is 74% corn, 18% rye, 8% malted barley. Comes in at 124.4 proof. Let's get in the nose. Yeah, there's dark fruits and like a buttery kind of like cinnamon to this one. Yeah, there's a lot of you get a little bit of that oakiness. There's some sweet oak to it, but it's like a buttered kind of like a cinnamon butter on top of like a bread roll almost, if you will. A little bit of some oak in there, not necessarily on that sweet side, but you do get some of that older oak that's in there. And then further into the glass, you start to pick up some fruitiness, like a raisin, a little bit of a plum in there, and then it's almost like almond paste. It has like this a slight hint of nuttiness to it. That's further into the glass as well. Could be a play off of that oak, but further into the glass, like almond paste. And then there's again like some of that dark fruit, like a raisin or a plum. And then you get some of that, again, oakiness a little bit further away, and like a cinnamon buttered like roll. Really nice nose on this one, though, guys. Let's get in the palate. Cheers. So on this one, first sip comes off a little bit spicy on the front and mid palate. Comes off a little spicy, but it's like a very kind of baking spice forward spiciness. Like, it's 124 proof, so it's not shy on the proof, but there's a lot of different baking spices on this one. It has like this very, very slight kind of minty note, but then there's also some nutmeg. There's some allspice that kind of just sits there. I'm not getting a lot of cinnamon like baking spices on here. I did get some of that on the nose, but this is more like nutmeg, allspice. There's actually like a little bit of a kind of a baking pepper spiciness to it as well, almost like that bird's eye pepper, where it's like this slight hint of fruit, but then spicy at the same time. So back of the palate, you start to pull out some of that pepper, black pepper, into the finish. It's a pretty nice first sip. I mean, the spiciness from the proof and then the spiciness from those baking spices were definitely a punch to the mouth there on that first sip. Let's get to the second one, guys. So now on the front of the palate, now that spice kind of went away, I think it was just the first sip. Like, now it's like this clove caramel kind of note there that sits on the front of the palate. So there's like that sweetness, but there's also like that clove there. Again, this is very baking spice forward. But again, that nutmeg, that allspice kind of still sitting there on that middle of the palate. And it's just like the baking spices just saturate the middle of the palate there. It is just like completely coated. But then now towards the back of the palate, it gets a little different because it turns into this like darker side. It's like this maple, a slight bit of like maple syrup. Slight bit of maple syrup, and then some of that oak again starts. It's not a sweet oak. It's definitely like an older oak profile. It starts to kind of appear there with that maple syrup, and it's a slight hint of maple syrup. It's not a lot. And then like some kind of pepper, some black pepper kind of sprinkled on it, and there is a fruitiness. It's a fruitiness and a spiciness. It is like a bird's eye pepper where it's again fruity and then spicy. along with those baking spices that continue to kind of mingle around. It almost like it almost tingles the palate a little bit, like your tongue. It's really good, though. Again, I love baking spices in a whiskey, and this has a lot of it. So let's get a last sip, guys. Cheers. Yeah, so that sip changed again. So this one's kind of evolving here on the palate. So on the front of the palate, again, like that that kind of rich caramel is there, and then that clove kind of, you know, makes it its appearance. And then middle of the palate again, very baking spice heavy. The allspice, the nutmeg, kind of just like sitting there, saturating the palate. But now I get like this small hint of like some pipe tobacco. That's like sitting in between the mid to back palate. Again, where some of that oak starts, that older oak starts to, you know, you get some of those tannins that start to appear. Yeah, I mean that's really good. And then yeah, so it's like a pipe tobacco, maple syrup, black pepper that kind of start to really kind of mingle around together on the back of that palate. I mean, for their first non-finished whiskey, this is pretty good. This is really good. Again, I love a lot of baking spices in a whiskey, and it's got a lot. It's got a lot going on, and it's, you know, I mean, from front to back, this was a pretty good sipper here. Again, not shy on the heat. Really nice kind of flavor profile to it. Again, that sweetness, that clove, and then the baking spices all over the middle of the palate. You know, some pipe tobacco starting to make its appearance, and then into the back is like this maple syrup, some oak, some black pepper that kind of makes its appearance there too. But either way, job well done here by Seelbachs. So I thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews. I want to send a big thank you over to my buddy Todd D for supplying me with this bottle here to review on the channel. Again, guys, you know, I don't know if there's any more of these left over at Seelbachs, but this is definitely a pour that you should look into. I'm not even, to be honest with you, I'm not even sure of the price point of it. I'm not sure what the price is, but regardless, I mean, this is a pretty good whiskey. It's 15-year-old whiskey, so you got that age, you got a lot of baking spices, but you also have a lot of sweetness too to kind of counterbalance that that overly dominant baking spice note. But then it's nice on the back of the palate. You start to pull out some maple syrup and some of those oak tannins. There was actually, on the very last sip, there started to be like a little bit of like earthiness to it, almost like a tea, like a black tea note. But either way, I mean, this is definitely something worth checking out. I mean, I actually really like this pour. Again, I love the baking spices, and then having some of those older kind of notes, the old oak tannins, and then some of that maple syrup start to appear, the clove, the baking spices. That's really what I look for in a whiskey. Had a pretty nice finish to it, so couldn't really ask for more here from Seelbachs, guys. So if you're looking for more reviews like this, hit that subscribe button, bell notification to be alerted of any upcoming reviews or live streams. You also find me on Instagram at Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews. Till next time, guys, stay dusty.